This is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, I'm Atelli Edwards. Tonight's top stories. Day 2 of senior-level economic talks between the US and China. Officials racing to wrap up trade deals ahead of a presidential summit, though that meeting could be delayed amid Washington's calls to send warships to secure the Strait of Hormuz. And in East Asia, a cautious response to joining a US-led mission in the key Mideast waterway. Japan says it's not considering maritime operations, while South Korea is reviewing America's request. Now, high fuel prices prompting the Japanese government to start its largest ever oil release from its strategic reserves, moving ahead of a coordinated global drawdown. China's economy starting the year on firm footing with fresh data showing factory output accelerating and retail sales picking up.
You'll find all kinds of AI gadgets, from an AI plush toy that is priced at around $80 to an AI health monitoring device that costs around $320.
Chinese AI firms want their products in households, but consumer demand hasn't taken off. We look at what's holding potential buyers back. Chinese and American officials are holding a second day of trade talks in Paris, with discussions aimed at laying the groundwork for a summit between leaders Donald Trump and Xi Jinping in Beijing this month. Tariffs, rare earths and high-tech export controls topping the agenda between delegations led by U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Chinese Vice Premier He Lifeng. Their underlying differences on trade highlighted, with Beijing urging Washington to correct its erroneous ways, and in response to new probes launched last week by the Trump administration. Well, there are also concerns that the planned leaders' summit could be delayed as tensions escalate in the Middle East. Mr. Trump said that he could postpone the visit as he urges China, along with other countries, to help reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Beijing has responded cautiously.
霍尔木兹海峡及其附近的水域近期局势紧张，冲击国际货物和能源贸易通道，破坏了地区和世界和平稳定。中方在此呼吁各方立即停止军事行动，避免紧张事态进一步升级，防止地区的局势动荡对全球经济发展造成更大影响。
For more, we are joined by Ross Cullen, who is covering this story for CNA in Paris, as well as CNA senior correspondent Tan Yuguan in Shanghai. First to you, Ross. Walk us through what are some of the main priorities each side has brought to the table so far?
Yeah, hi, Atelli. They're looking at agricultural alignment on possible imports and exports there. They are talking about the economic and fiscal relationship between the two sides. They're in something of a trade truce at the moment, and they want to know if there are areas of advancements that can be made. Almost 1 year ago, we had those sweeping tariffs announced by the US president, and then China announced retaliatory tit-for-tat tariffs, each more punitive than the last, until finally the two sides decided to dial down those tensions slightly. So we're looking for economic and fiscal announcements, if anything comes through on that. Also, of course, we are watching those preparations for the possible summit that's been announced by Washington, still waiting for official confirmation from Beijing, and to see if Scott Bessent and He Lifeng can agree on what their presidents will agree at the summit later in the month.
You've talked about trade truce, but what about other signs of emerging compromises?
Well, we are looking at the economic and the fiscal and the diplomatic side of things at Telly, but also I think what's interesting to note is that the war in Iran has provided another area where there could be common alignment. China certainly concerned about what's happening in the Strait of Hormuz. Donald Trump has called on countries like where I am, France and other European nations, along with China, to help secure shipping in that part of the world. So, in fact, there could be a breakthrough when it comes to the overall policy from Washington and Beijing regarding how to secure shipping in the Strait.
All right, for China's perspective, let's bring Yu Guan in here. Yu Guan, China, how are they likely going to view that potential delay to President Trump's trip that's currently planned for the end of this month, of course, pending Beijing's help to reopen the Strait of Hormuz?
Well, when it comes to this matter, I think Beijing is likely to play this very coolly. Publicly, China's foreign ministry, you saw there, is not really engaging in the pressure tactic head-on. It also said, besides that soundbite you just heard, that it stressed that leader-level diplomacy remains important and that both sides are still communicating about Trump's visit. And when it comes to Beijing, the message has always been China will not negotiate under pressure, especially pressure that is expressed so publicly. And privately, a delay may not be entirely bad news for Beijing because, unless the Paris talks can produce something really concrete for both leaders to bless, there may be little reason for China to rush a summit. And we do know that rather than a sweeping reset, we're just looking for new ways to manage trade. And there is also a broader point here. China goes into these talks feeling somewhat less exposed than before. The latest January-February trade data shows that exports to the U.S. fell 11%, while shipments to ASEAN rose about 29%, to the EU 28%, and to Africa 50%. They all rose sharply. The U.S. remains, however, the largest single country export destination. A single set of rules is what makes the American market attractive compared to, say, ASEAN, a grouping of countries. But with those rules changing constantly, the attractiveness is diminishing very quickly. And that strengthens China's hands in these trade talks. In the meantime, China still has room to make a U-turn on its commitment to buy U.S. soybeans because it knows this will hurt President Trump right where it hurts, in the soy-producing red states and regions of the U.S. It is, after all, at one point in time, the biggest purchaser of U.S. soy. Now, it can also go back on its commitment to give U.S. access to rare earths. Despite moves to find alternatives, it would still take the U.S. some time to get them up and running. Otelli?
What about the U.S. Section 301 investigations, though? I mean, could it be a spanner in the works?
Yes. I mean, this goes directly to trust. China's Commerce Ministry has reacted very sharply to the new Section 301 move on forced labor, calling it unilateral, arbitrary, discriminatory, and protectionist. And it came right after another 301 action tied to overcapacity. So from Beijing's perspective, Washington is escalating pressure even as both sides are supposed to be talking in Paris. That does not necessarily kill the talks. But, as was reported, talks have remained remarkably stable. But the new move can absolutely complicate them because it hardens China's position. It worsens the political atmosphere. It makes any compromise harder to justify back home. Beijing can reasonably argue if the U.S. is still, opening new trade fronts, why should China move too far, too fast? So far, it's probably not a deal breaker just yet, but it is very much a drag on momentum. Otelli?
Hey, many thanks for those reports. CNA senior correspondent Tan Yu Guan in Shanghai, as well as Ross Cullen covering the story for CNA in Paris. Now, the war with Iran is forcing U.S. allies to make difficult decisions after President Donald Trump called on partners to help secure shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. Around a fifth of global oil supply passes through the narrow waterway. Now, with shipping traffic now effectively halted, shockwaves are rippling through the global economy. In East Asia, for instance, governments are responding cautiously. Japan, officially a pacifist country due to its war-renouncing 1947 constitution, says it's not considering maritime security operations despite Washington's call.
まだ求められておりませんので、仮定のことにはお答えしにくうございます。日本政府として必要な対応を行う方法を現在検討中です。もちろん日本の法律の範囲内でございますけれども、どのように日本関係船舶およびその乗員の命を守っていくか、何ができるかということを検討中でございます。
In South Korea, protests have broken out over the possibility of joining a U.S.-led mission. The presidential office says Seoul is still reviewing the request, adding that South Korea will stay in close communication with the U.S. before making a decision.
동맹국들에게 그것도 한국을 콕 집어서 이란의 파병을 요구를 했다는 얘기를 듣고 너무나 분노스러웠고 더 이상 참을 수가 없었습니다.
Other US partners are also holding back. Australia says it will not send Navy ships. France has not publicly responded. And Britain says it has discussed reopening shipping routes but gave no details on deployments. And we'll have more insights later on US President Donald Trump's call for help to reopen the Strait of Hormuz when we speak with Associate Professor Chong Jia-in from the National University of Singapore. Well, the Philippines has rejected Beijing's assertion of sovereignty over the entire South China Sea. This comes after the Chinese embassy in Manila said that a Filipino diplomat had once acknowledged that the disputed Scarborough Shoal was not part of Philippine territory. Manila's foreign ministry said that claims must follow established legal procedures and dispute settlement mechanisms and not one-sided proclamations or social media posts. Scarborough Shoal is a frequent flashpoint between the two countries. The comments mark the latest in a war of words between Philippine officials and the Chinese embassy in Manila. China did not immediately respond to Manila's remarks today. Well, the strategic shoal sits near major shipping lanes and is known for its rich fishing grounds, as well as a lagoon that provides shelter for vessels during storms. The two sides have been involved in repeated confrontations over territorial disputes in a waterway. Our break's up next, but coming up on East Asia Tonight, a Chinese ban on jet fuel exports prompting Vietnam's airlines to review their flight plans. And the world's biggest contract electronics maker gives guidance for the full year for the first time. We'll tell you what's driving their optimistic forecast.
When frequent flooding puts your family and finances underwater.
The more kasi na mas mataas yung baha, the more na mas mataas yung presyo ng mga bilihin sa amin.
What $100 oil means for your investment portfolio. Plus, she borrowed in minutes and ended up owing 10 times her pay. Money Mind, Wednesday on CNA.
商业航天的一个产业的急剧爆发，现在已经是正式的开始了。
Now everyone is accepting this sea beauty wave.
Senior homes now to the Tumia. There is a large potential that needs to be further tapped.
Rockets, mascara, and senior care. China's pockets of growth. Wednesday on CNA.
CNA Summit 2026 brought together global leaders in Jakarta, marking its first ever edition outside Singapore in Indonesia. Taking place in one of Southeast Asia's most dynamic markets, discussions centered on smart growth in a new era.
This is time for us to have more collaboration among ASEAN countries, not only in terms of trade, but also in investment. There's still untapped potential that we can work together in order to achieve all the goals.
The call for deeper regional partnership set the tone for forward-looking dialogue.
It's a really good decision to do it in Indonesia because Indonesia is a very big country and it's a big market as well.
Smart growth means a balance between profitability and sustainability, managing the efficiency so we can also bring sustainable profit going forward.
Driving conversations that shape tomorrow's growth. The CNA Summit. Brought to you by MediaCorp. Main partner, Singtel. Hello Possibilities.
Hello again. Time now for business news on East Asia Tonight. China's economy building momentum in the first 2 months of this year, with retail sales and investment picking up, along with an acceleration in factory output. Retail sales for the first 2 months of the year rose 2.8% from a year earlier. That's a jump from the 0.9% in December. Factory output expanded 6.3% in the January to February period, its fastest growth since September. Industrial production has been a relative bright spot, reflecting robust foreign demand.
那么从消费来看呢，今年以来呢，这个春节的超长假期的带动作用是比较明显。那么消费品以旧换新的政策呢，持续显效啊。我们也可以看到呢，这个文化旅游、休闲娱乐 这些活动呢都比较活跃。那服务消费呢增长比较快。
Investment in fixed assets advanced 1.8% from a year earlier, blowing past estimates of a 5% drop and reversing last year's unprecedented slump. Unemployment rate stood at 5.3% in February, slightly higher than expected. And housing data showed prices of the country's new homes contracted last month, indicating the troubled property sector is still some ways away from recovery. Well, China's authorities modestly scaled back fiscal stimulus plans for this year as they lowered their annual growth target. The National Statistics Bureau spokesperson sounded a note of caution.
那么近期呢，中东地区的地缘政治冲突造成的国际油价的波动，引发市场的担忧。但我国的能源供给的保障能力比较强，应对外部市场波动的具有较好的基础和条件。目前呢，影响国际能源价格的不确定因素比较多，对国内价格输入性影响呢，还需要观察。
China's investments and assets coming under fire in the Middle East as the war continues. The widening war choked crude supplies. China's largest oil refiner, Sinopec, has slashed run rates as a result, and it is cutting total processing by 10% this month as it imports more than half of its crude from the region. Now, Iran has been a cheap source of oil for China in recent years and continues to export to the Asian nation. In 2021, China signed an economic and security agreement to invest $400 billion in Iran over 25 years in exchange for a steady supply of oil. Dozens of Chinese companies have also financed, built, and operate infrastructure, electric grids, and petrochemical plants in the country. But with all the unrest, China's economic interests in the rest of the Middle East are coming under threat. More than 50% of China's crude and condensate imports come from various countries across the region. Chinese exports to the region last year growing nearly twice as fast as its exports to the rest of the world. It is the second largest overseas market for China-made vehicles. 1/6 of China's total car exports last year went to Gulf countries such as Saudi Arabia and the UAE. Well, the region accounted for 14% of China's total finished steel exports by volume last year. Saudi Arabia and the UAE are among China's top individual steel export destinations. Now, China's credit also at risk, having extended loans for contracts and projects throughout the Middle East. Beijing's global portfolio of loans and grants to the region doubled to 10% in 2023. That's according to Research Institute aid data. Recipients include a new liquefied natural gas production facility in Qatar. Well, that facility was attacked last week. Well, Chinese investors have also poured funds into the expansion of Israel's Haifa port and the UAE's Khalifa port, and the terminals owned and operated by Chinese companies. It is also the largest investor in desalination in the Middle East, with projects in Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, Oman, and Iraq. Well, Japan, meantime, has begun releasing its strategic oil reserves into the market in a bid to ease concerns of rising fuel prices. The move comes ahead of the International Energy Agency's coordinated release of its record 400 million barrel stockpile that was announced last week. Japan's Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi said that the country will take the lead to release its strategic reserves without waiting for IEA's coordinated move with other nations. Japan's strategic oil reserves are among the world's largest and stood at more than 400 million barrels as of December. The country holds emergency reserves equivalent to more than 250 days of domestic consumption. Well, the IEA said that over the weekend that its record 400 million barrel stockpile release will be made available immediately for Asia and Oceania, with buyers in a region most reliant on flows from the Middle East. Traders are watching this closely at the speed at which oil supplies will hit the market to gauge how effective the IEA effort will be in taming oil price increases. Last week, the agency said that the oil market is seeing the biggest supply disruption in history due to the war in the Middle East, which has blocked the Strait of Hormuz. The escalating conflict in the Middle East is beginning to disrupt global plastics production, with Japan and South Korea facing potential shortages of a key raw material. While naphtha, a petroleum product used to make plastics, has become harder to secure after attacks linked to Iran effectively shut shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, a major energy route. Japan and South Korea rely heavily on imports for their naphtha supply. Japan imports around 47% of its supply from the Gulf, while South Korea's inbound shipments are around 40% from the Middle East. Well, governments in both countries are now weighing measures to support the industry, which is considered critical to economic security and supply chains. Well, that's as prices surged by about 50% in just a month for the Japanese market, reaching around $875 a ton. Now, petrochemical producers across Asia are already feeling the strain. In Japan, Mitsubishi Chemical and Mitsui Chemicals have also reduced production, and analysts warn more plants could face shutdowns if supplies don't improve by mid-April. Now, South Korea's largest ethylene producer, Yochun NCC, has cut operations to minimum capacity, while companies including Lotte Chemical and LG Chem have warned they may not be able to meet contracts. Now, China's ban on jet fuel exports rippling out to Vietnam's aviation industry. The Southeast Asian nation is anticipating fewer flights from next month as it contends with both the Chinese move and a similar one from Thailand due to shortage concerns from the ongoing war on Iran. Vietnam's Civil Aviation Authority warned of supply pressure in the coming months and called on airlines to review their flight patterns. Airport operators have been ordered to allocate extra parking spaces for local carriers to dock their planes, all in preparation for potential operation cuts. Two-thirds of Vietnam's jet fuel is imported from China and Thailand, according to Chinese customs data. Vietnam was its third largest buyer of aviation kerosene in 2025, and it has also recorded a drop in supplies from Singapore. Now, Vietnam's main fuel importers, Petrolimex and Skypack, said that jet fuel supplies are only secured up to this month. Skypack urged the national aviation regulator to limit flights to important domestic routes if the Middle East conflict becomes prolonged. These warnings come after Beijing last week imposed a hard ban on refined fuel exports. Thailand also placed similar bans earlier this month, with exceptions to Myanmar and Laos. Taiwan's Foxconn is forecasting strong growth this year. The electronics giant is expecting strong demand for artificial intelligence infrastructure and significant year-on-year growth in smart consumer electronics revenue. Well, that optimism comes as Foxconn posted a 2% growth in net adjusted income, measured in US dollars, for the October to December period, and revenue growth of 28%. Foxconn is a key player in the global tech supply chain, assembling iPhones for Apple and building AI servers for NVIDIA. A Taiwanese manufacturer is increasingly shifting globally. While most iPhones are still assembled in China, many devices sold in the United States are now produced in India. The company is also building new facilities in Mexico and Texas to manufacture AI servers for NVIDIA. Now, in other news, a hacking group linked to North Korea is spreading malware using stolen KakaoTalk accounts. South Korean Cybersecurity Institute, Jinnyan's Security Center, says that the group known as Kony is using a new tactic that begins with spear phishing emails disguised as invitations to lecture on North Korean human rights. If recipients click the link in that message, hackers will gain remote access to the victims' computers. Malicious files are then sent to contacts linked to the compromised accounts. The report says this makes the threat particularly serious, turning traditional phishing into a self-propagating cyber attack. The Cybersecurity Institute says that the Kony group is tied to Kimsuki, as well as other hacking groups believed to be backed by Pyongyang. Now, earlier this year, researchers flagged a similar campaign by Kony that spread malware through online advertising systems run by Naver and Google. Coming up on East Asia tonight, U.S. President Donald Trump calls for help to protect ships plying the Strait of Hormuz. What this means for U.S. alliances in East Asia, and whether the Iran conflict risks reshaping regional security priorities. More insights after the break with Associate Professor Chong Jia-in from the National University, Singapore.
On the next Asia Fast, how the U.S. and Israel's war on Iran is casting a shadow on trade talks between the world's two largest economies. President Donald Trump now linking a summit with Chinese leader Xi Jinping to the conflict in the Middle East, pressing Beijing to help unblock the Strait of Hormuz.
aspirations and attitudes of Singaporeans are changing the nation that raised them.
Passionate Singaporeans living out their very ambitious dreams.
We're looking to write a story of greatness of extraordinary people impacting communities.
I guess a part of me wanted to connect even deeper with the people.
There's no point playing it safe. Safe will always be forgotten.
If we as Singaporeans are able to have a satellite that we can truly say was conceived, designed, engineered and built in Singapore, wow, how wonderful would it be?
This is Singapore. We don't give up.
Hello, how can I help you today?
Across Singapore, buildings are running smarter and cleaner.
Incorporating AI into sensors, CCTVs, and robotics.
Our smart system flag out any issues before any breakdown.
It means getting more done without using more.
We need to start looking at buildings as living ecosystems.
Building change. Thursday on CNA.
Brought to you by Build SG, championed by BCA.
This is East Asia Tonight, and here are the headlines we're following. U.S. and Chinese officials meet in Paris today to advance trade talks ahead of a planned leaders' summit this month. But there is uncertainty after U.S. President Donald Trump linked progress to security in the Strait of Hormuz. U.S. allies have responded cautiously to Mr. Trump's call to help secure shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. Japan has ruled out maritime operations. South Korea says it is carefully reviewing the request. And Tokyo taps its strategic oil reserves as energy markets reel from Middle East supply disruptions. This comes ahead of a coordinated move by the International Energy Agency to release a record 400 million barrel stockpile. Well, as mentioned, President Trump is calling on allies to help secure shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. But questions are emerging about what this could mean for U.S. alliances in East Asia. So for more insights, let's bring in Chong Jia-Yin, Associate Professor of Political Science, National University of Singapore, and also a non-resident scholar at Carnegie, China. Well, thanks, Prof, for joining us this evening. So let's just start with the broader strategic picture here and talk about Trump's request for allies to send ships. What does it say about Washington's ability to manage multiple security crises at once, especially when tensions are still high in the Indo-Pacific?
Right. So it signals a couple of things that are not necessarily consistent because we don't really know what is behind President Trump's thinking. One is that possibly that U.S. capabilities are stretched thin. That has been the dominant narrative because of the need to supply ammunition to the Gulf. But the other point that the Trump administration has been making is that it doesn't want to shoulder all the burden for security and stability. Since the election campaign and since the first Trump administration, President Trump has made the claim that he needs to shift more of the burden to allies who benefit from U.S. security. So that could also be happening as well. Both could be considerations, but we don't really have enough information to know at this point. But it could be either. Either way, that would put a lot of questions on how U.S. allies may want to shore up the U.S. claim, how they think about not turning the U.S. down, or if they don't come up with enough, how the Trump administration may potentially retaliate. So these would be questions on the table.
So if we look at the countries being called on for help, right? I mean, Trump's argument is that these are the countries benefiting from Gulf oil. We're talking about Japan, South Korea, China, and they should help secure the Strait of Hormuz. But how realistic, though? I mean, is that expectation given these countries' regional and domestic priorities?
Right. So I guess for the regional domestic priorities, there's also the question how far they can project force, right? So Japan, it probably can, but it has constitutional restraints. It also has this, it can't really project that far without U.S. support. The same thing for South Korea. The PRC probably can. It has had activities in the Indian Ocean for a while. But I suppose the question is, if they do so, would it
appear as if they were being cornered by Trump. Certainly, the Xi leadership doesn't want to look weak. And I suppose for the Japanese and Korean cases, they would also be thinking about, okay, whether they would get blowback for not supporting the Trump administration. Would they be overcommitting and exposing themselves to more potential risk? So, these are sort of variables that are at play, and I think it's giving everybody quite a difficult time at this point.
Well, Professor, staying with Japan for a moment, one of East Asia's guests or other experts, Professor Taniguchi, who's also a former advisor to the late Shinzo Abe, he's argued that if ships bound for Japan are threatened in places like the Strait of Hormuz, and it begs the question, right? What exactly are Japan's self-defense forces for if they can't act in that situation? So what are your thoughts on that?
Sure, I mean, that's an argument to be made. That's an argument to be made to the Japanese public. Bearing in mind, as you had mentioned, Japan right now has multiple concerns. It's got the East China Sea. It's looking at stability around Taiwan and the South China Sea. It has pressure from joint Russian and PRC air patrols near its territory. So it's got to address those issues while also being concerned with fossil fuel shipments, right? It's oil and gas. So that means the Japanese attention, Japanese resources could be pulled in different directions. The Japanese leadership, the Takaichi administration, will need to sort of make a determination how they want to weigh these different things. They could make an argument to the US that says, look, we're going to do more in East Asia so that you can devote perhaps more attention and more capabilities to the Middle East. That's a possibility as well. But all this needs to be presented to the Japanese public.
There's also the question of military bandwidth. Can this conflict end up weakening deterrence in East Asia? If U.S. military assets are being, diverted away?
That's certainly a possibility. That's been a concern for a while. I think especially with the movement of some of the elements of the THAAD missile defense system from South Korea ostensibly to the Middle East. That's been a concern that South Korea has raised. That's also an issue about, how they can possibly deter North Korea. But I suppose the question is how much capability you need for deterrence. South Korea is quite capable. It should be able to deter North Korea, but of course the added layer of assurance would probably be very much welcome. So I guess a lot will also rest on how long the conflict in Iran lasts, right? The longer it lasts, the more it would drain on U.S. resources, and also it would come down to how much the U.S. is able to replenish its own ammunition while also supplying its allies. President Trump said they can do a lot, but that's not independently verified at this point.
And Professor, let's turn to the diplomatic angle here, because Trump, he's even suggested that his summit with Xi Jinping could be delayed unless China helps with the Hormuz situation. How unusual is it to actually use a high-level diplomatic meeting as leverage in a security crisis like this?
That might be unusual for others, but with President Trump, he prides himself on unpredictability. So that is something that, he could try to push on General Secretary Xi Jinping. But whether Xi, agrees, that's a different story altogether. I don't think Xi wants to seem weak. He doesn't want to seem cornered by Trump. And also, I guess Xi would be asking, what would he get in return, right? So if he provides forces, yes, that would help the PRC out. But if it seems that this is happening at U.S. The request of the United States, what does he get in return from the United States? What is the United States prepared to give? All that is not clear at this point.
So China, of course, among the countries that Trump expects to help secure the Strait of Hormuz, right? Given its heavy reliance on the Gulf. But how do you think Beijing is looking at all of this? How are they interpreting this move, given its close commercial ties with Iran?
So the PRC is in a pretty delicate situation. It's got close ties with Iran, including security ties, including economic ties. But it has also been developing economic ties across the Gulf region, including with Israel. And it's in desalination, it's in oil refining, in various Gulf states. So that means to say that the PRC has got many different bases to cover. Some of these aren't really consistent. I suppose they would want to protect their equities, but the question is, how would they do so if Iran and some of its key partners are at odds with each other, especially if Iran is using Chinese-sourced equipment for their attacks? So, to square that circle is not a very easy proposition.
And so, Prof, let's just look a little bit further ahead. Let's say this becomes a prolonged, this Iran conflict is prolonged. How do you think, and to what extent, that would reshape the security priorities in East Asia?
So it depends on how prolonged it is and whether that really drains U.S. capability. A lot of the stability in East Asia right now rests either directly or indirectly on a U.S. forward presence that is robust, that creates a certain degree of deterrence. And it's something that different actors, even if they don't like it, are living with right now. So if that U.S. presence becomes a lot weaker, we would have to ask the question whether other actors might take that opportunity to improve, in their eyes, their own position. And how would others then respond, right? So that raises up a lot more uncertainty.
Well, appreciate your insights as always. Thank you so much for your time and thoughts. Chong Jia-Yen, Associate Professor, Political Science, National University of Singapore. Well, U.S. and Israeli forces are continuing their bombardment of Iran, striking cities including Tehran, Isfahan, and Hamadan. President Trump says that he remains unsure if he should pursue a deal with the Middle Eastern country. Retaliatory strikes also from Iran against U.S. allies in the region. Saudi Arabia saying it's intercepted more than 60 drones in an overnight attack. And flights are partially resumed at Dubai International Airport after a drone-related incident. A Palestinian civilian killed after a missile fell in Abu Dhabi. Meantime, the Israel Defense Forces starts new ground operations in South Lebanon, saying it's targeting Hezbollah strongholds. It earlier struck more than 200 targets in Iran, including IRGC headquarters in the western part of the country, and said attacks will continue until goals of the operation are achieved. Now, the Iranian Health Ministry said at least 1,400 people have been killed since the start of the war. 15 people have been killed in Israel. The U.S. military has confirmed 13 fatalities. Well, Ollie Barrett, who is covering the story for CNA, joins us live from Erbil in Iraq. So, Ollie, walk us through the latest developments in the conflict so far.
Well, I tell you, as you were saying about many of those developments that you've listed there were really updates in all sorts of different parts of the region and in all sorts of different ways. It does seem to be a growing theme of escalating attacks on infrastructure targets by all sides in this conflict. You mentioned the resumption of flights at Dubai International Airport after a drone strike on that fuel tank site caused a fire there. We are also seeing the IDF of Israel saying that it's been widening its strike list inside Iran with further strikes today. It also has described what it says the IDF is a limited targeted ground operation against Hezbollah in South Lebanon. In the UAE at Fujairah, that port that was hit, damage is being assessed there to see how significant that damage actually has been. And here in Iraq, continued attacks and attempted attacks by Iran-backed militia groups. We've had at least 2 very loud explosions here in Erbil today. We're waiting details of about exactly what they were. They were likely to have been projectiles of some sort, probably brought down by coalition air defense systems here. So, as I say, really everywhere you look in the region, almost at the moment, further escalation and that conflict, if anything, widening, and those added attempts by various sides in this conflict to hit infrastructure targets.
Well, Ollie, it's been 2 weeks into the crisis. Do we know how countries have been adjusting their approach to mediation efforts?
Well, they're having to be quite nimble about all of that, partly because of the American positioning and how that can change and adapt almost daily at the moment, partly based on what President Trump says from one day to the next. And a key element of that right now is President Trump's insistence that other countries, he names China, the UK and others, should send ships to the Strait of Hormuz to be involved in trying to make sure there is safe passage for oil and other supplies through that route. That is something that's controversial. In Europe, we've been hearing various countries pushing back against the idea. In the UK today, we've been hearing from government ministers saying, look, this isn't really how NATO was designed to work in terms of responding to an attack, which is how President Trump has been seeming to attempt to describe it in recent hours. And then, of course, just to bring it back to where I am, a row breaking out here in Iraq between politicians in the north and the federal government in the south about how to try and get more oil via pipelines into the international market. In the north, they accused the federal government in the south of effectively a blockade on the movement of US dollars into this part of the country. So, again, just a local example of the way in which this wider conflict is making life difficult.
Well, thanks so very much for that report. Ollie Barrett speaking for CNA from Erbil, Iraq. Well, we are going to go for another break now, but coming up on East Asia tonight. Consumer demand in China for home AI products remains slow. We look at what's holding buyers back. Plus, we'll tell you more on who took home the awards on Hollywood's Golden Night.
Something to give you.
What's this? Oh gosh, meet me there.
Meet me Oh, it's gonna be a hunt, huh?
Meet me there. Amma. I'm honestly not very confident that I'll be able to find her today.
Whether Selena Tan is here or not is whether this door open, is it?
Girl, where are you?
I wonder if Ray will find me when I said meet me there.
I'm feeling very sad. I can't find her.
This location is significant because I've seen her grown as a person.
She is not here.
I've got to think emotionally. What is significant in our life?
Why would you come to the east?
Why not?
Across India, millions of workers complain of one issue: burnout.
The surveys tell us that it's extremely common.
Why is Indian work culture so brutal?
We have a very ingrained feeling that once I hire a person, his life, his time, I can utilize whenever I want.
If you are not ready to do it, there are at least 500 other people who are.
And what damage is it doing?
I got to a point where I would even dread opening my laptop.
Insight, Thursday on CNA.
This week on Singapore Hour.
I'm Todd. I'm a ceramic artist currently based in Hainan City. I go around scavenging unwanted materials that artists have left behind. What is my most expensive artwork? I have this piece that is $10 million.
Scents by Six is a homegrown perfumery. People have the impression that scent is all about smelling good. It can also make you feel good and do good as well.
All this and more on Singapore Hour, Friday on CNA. Thai crew members of a vessel attacked in the Strait of Hormuz last week have returned home. The cargo ship was struck by 2 projectiles of unknown origin while sailing through the Strait of Hormuz. Well, the 20 sailors landed in Bangkok this morning. 3 remaining members are still missing, but Thai officials believe they are alive. Foreign ministry officials say they are working with its Omani and Iranian counterparts on the case. Thailand said it was still seeking clarity from Iran's ambassador and the facts surrounding the incident, and has demanded an apology for the damage caused to the Thai vessel. While Iran's Revolutionary Guards had said that the ship was, quote, fired upon by Iranian fighters.
It's a very critical issue for us. We are in touch with our Omani counterparts as well as our Iranian counterparts at high levels. My foreign minister spoke with the foreign minister of Iran yesterday, and this was one of the issues that we asked both Iran and Oman for their assistance with. That is about all that I can say at this point because of the sensitivities surrounding any rescue mission that we conduct.
Now, Myanmar's parliament has convened for the first time since a military coup 5 years ago. Lawmakers gathered in the capital, Naypyidaw, to elect the leader of the army-backed Union Solidarity and Development Party as the lower house speaker. After 5 years of military rule, the junta held a phased vote last December and this January, which saw the USDP gain the most vote share. Well, this meant majority of the MPs in the People's Assembly hailed from the party, and most of the remaining lawmakers belong to the armed forces, who are entitled to a quarter of unelected seats under the Constitution. Now, many Western countries dismissed the latest polls, which saw low voter turnout and no viable opposition, as a sham designed to entrench military rule. Singapore Prime Minister Lawrence Wong will be in Japan from tomorrow till Thursday, where he will meet his counterpart Sanae Takaichi. The official visit takes place as the two countries mark 60 years of ties and is part of Prime Minister Wong's introductory visits to key partners in the region. Sherlyn Xia reports from Tokyo.
Decades after Singapore and Japan established diplomatic relations in 1966, Japan has grown into one of Singapore's most significant economic partners. Trade and investment ties between the two countries remain robust, with Japan among Singapore's top trading partners and more than 5,000 Japanese companies operating in Singapore today. Bilateral services trade has also expanded significantly to around 68 billion Singapore dollars annually, driven largely by digital services and growing collaboration in emerging sectors. Cooperation is also strong in areas such as technology, energy, green solutions, and even space. These are among the areas likely to be discussed when Prime Minister Lawrence Wong meets Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi here in Tokyo. PM Wong will attend a welcome ceremony, hold official talks with PM Takaichi, and be hosted to a working dinner. He will also meet other senior Japanese political and business leaders. Scheduled as well is a reception with overseas Singaporeans based in Japan, a reflection of close people-to-people ties between the two countries, alongside strong tourism flows. Last year alone, more than 600,000 visitors travelled from Japan to Singapore, while over 700,000 Singaporeans visited Japan. The visit also signals what Singapore has described as a new chapter in bilateral ties. Earlier this month, Senior Minister of State for Foreign Affairs Sim Ann said Singapore and Japan are looking to elevate relations as both sides deepen cooperation on various fronts. More broadly, the trip reflects Singapore's efforts to strengthen engagement with Northeast Asia, which includes key partners China, Japan, and South Korea. PM Wong has already made visits to China and South Korea since taking office in 2024, as Singapore works to deepen ties with major economies and strategic players in the region. PM Wong is also expected to travel to China later this month to attend the Boao Forum for Asia. Sherlyn Xia, CNA, Tokyo.
China's AI race is moving into the physical world. Beyond chatbots and large language models, Beijing is pushing physical AI, intelligence embedded in robots, cars, and smart devices. While companies are racing ahead, consumers may take longer to follow. CNA's Rebecca Mateo has this report.
These humanoids are for hire, and in China, they're now in high demand. This robot rental company in Wuhan says orders have more than doubled in recent weeks compared to the same period last year. The spike came after last month's Spring Festival Gala, where martial arts performing robots became the knockout hit. The spectacle also highlighted China's rapid advances in humanoid technology, or embodied AI.
客户对机器人的数量会变得翻倍目前接的最大的订单就是超过30台机器人这样的规模化的表演。
But rentals are not Mr. Chen's core business. His company develops the hardware and software systems that power the machines. These can be installed across robot platforms, allowing them to be customized for a range of industries.
然后客户对机器人的需求从表演慢慢延伸到了场景的应用包括机器人成为景区的导游，成为企业的员工。
Mr. Chen says nearly all of his clients today are enterprises or government-affiliated bodies. Household humanoids are still some way off.
因为现在家庭类的人机器人目前还为时尚早，而且机器人的智能化系统还有待我们再继续升级。
Analysts we spoke to agreed, but say it's the premise of what's possible that's making a difference.
Humanoid robots are not really ready for the real world practice because you need a lot of data and training them for years. But instead, some robotic features developed along with the humanoid development is that you can use some of their features like the dexterous hand or four legs robots to do different tasks, such as adding them on vacuum cleaner to climb stairs or having the hands on industrial robots to do different tasks.
Beijing believes the potential is huge. Officials say the scale of AI-related industries could grow to over $1.45 trillion by 2030. Its AI Plus initiative, first announced in 2024, now written into the latest 5-year plan, which begins this year. The initiative is pushing for AI to be integrated across sectors from manufacturing to healthcare. Embodied AI has also been listed as an industry of the future. Scrolling through Chinese e-commerce platforms, you'll find all kinds of AI gadgets, from an AI plush toy that is priced at around $80 to an AI health monitoring device that costs around $320. Last year, Chinese firm Noetics Robotics also unveiled a humanoid called Boomy, marketed as an education and entertainment companion, priced at around $1,400. The Beijing startup said this signaled humanoid robots entering the consumer market, but many remain cautious.
因为现在这个价格和科技也没有完全成熟到一个就是适用于老百姓这种很接地气的这么一个东西，所以先看吧。
最高的就是普通老百姓可能还是承受不了的，承受不起。
That hesitation highlights a key challenge for companies.
The biggest challenge for the systems to scale is to actually stimulate the consumers' paying interest. Because now, even though AI is getting more paying users from the enterprise sector, but it's much smaller than the broad consumer market.
The competition is already intense. Officials say there are more than 6,200 companies in China's AI sector, although analysts say the industry has not reached the involution-style cutthroat competitions seen in some other fields. Rebecca Mateo, CNA, Beijing.
Now, Hollywood's biggest night, the Oscars, was filled with surprises and historic wins. A warning to viewers, though, spoilers ahead if you haven't already tuned into the 98th Academy Awards. On Netflix's smash hit K-pop Demon Hunters bagged the Oscar for the Best Animated Feature. It beat Zootopia 2, Arco and Elio. It also took home the Gong for Best Song, the hit Golden outshining all others in that category.
Best Director Award.
A political thriller, one battle after another, beat all comers in a close fight for the coveted title of Best Picture. Paul Thomas Anderson's film didn't just win that battle, taking home 6 awards from 13 nominations. The movie features an all-star cast, including Sean Penn, Benicio del Toro, Regina Hall, and Leonardo DiCaprio, who missed the target for the Best Actor award. Well, that race, said to be one of the tightest in years, went to Michael B. Jordan, taking home the Golden Statue for the first time for his role as twins in the supernatural vampire horror film Sinners. He beat DiCaprio, Ethan Hawke, and Marty Supreme star Timothée Chalamet. And the Best Actress award went to Jessie Buckley for Hamnet. She's the first Irish woman to win in that category, besting fellow nominees Emma Stone, Kate Hudson, and Rose Byrne. The movie Hamnet was nominated in 8 categories, including Best Picture, Director, and Adapted Screenplay. Plus, an unusual moment in Oscars history, a tie. Well, 2 films took home the Golden Statue for live-action short film, 2 People Exchanging Saliva and The Singers. There have only been 6 ties in Oscars' near 100-year history. And that wraps up this Monday's edition of East Asia Tonight. Don't forget your headlines anytime at cna.asia and look us up on all our socials. Thanks for watching.